In Gaza, the controversial new aid organisation working in the territory has postponed the reopening of its facilities. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is backed by the US and Israel, closed its aid distribution centres on Wednesday after a series of incidents during which dozens of Palestinians were shot dead trying to access them. The United Nations and other aid organisations continue to press Israel to allow them into Gaza to deliver aid, which they say have been sitting on the border ready to go in. While at the same time, the US has vetoed a UN Security Council draft resolution calling for an unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. A lot to discuss. We can talk to Hussein Haridi, Egyptian ambassador and former assistant foreign minister for Egypt. Sir, welcome. We've just been speaking to a representative for UNICEF who says that this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation just does not meet humanitarian principles that provide proper and dignified aid distribution. What is your assessment of this new foundation?
Well, I get the suspension of the activities of this organization, the American organization, proves, madam, that the United States, the American administration, is working with the Israeli government. And the talk or these reports, press reports, that there are disagreements between the American administration and the Israeli government under Mr. Netanyahu are not quite accurate. I guess we after the American veto yesterday to a draft resolution before the Security Council of the United Nations, I guess that's further proof that the position of the American administration is aligned with the Mr. Netanyahu's government. So the suspension of the activities of this American aid organization is understandable in the context of what I have just said. The United States yesterday, by vetoing, exercising its veto power to this draft resolution, has proven that it's complicit in what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip. And if you allow me, madam, the draft resolution called for the release of the hostages, but in the meantime called for the immediate cessation of hostilities and an unconditional ceasefire, and with the unconditional access of humanitarian aid to Gaza Strip. And the act of vetoing this draft resolution means that the United States really is supporting all the objectives of the Israeli government in the Gaza Strip. And any talk about the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza on the part of the American administration really does not hold water, madam.
It is quite the accusation, sir, to say that the US is complicit in what Israel is doing in Gaza. If the United States were to say to you, look, we are just trying to facilitate a ceasefire agreement, and yes, you point to their vetoing of that resolution, which also included a clause calling for unrestricted aid to get in. If they say that they just simply want a ceasefire, how do you respond to that? Because like I say, to suggest that the US is complicit in what Israel is doing is a really strong accusation.
Well, madam, the proof is the veto yesterday. If we review the main paragraphs in the draft resolution, I guess it meets all the standards, all the demand of the international community. And Mr. Marco Rubio, the United States Secretary of State, defending the veto, said yes, from the American point of view, it was counterproductive. And I don't see how such a draft resolution with the main paragraphs, as I explained them, could be counterproductive. I am personally speaking, I guess the objectives, when the United States is speaking about a ceasefire, it wants the ceasefire to be applied according to conditions of Israel. And of course, this is not acceptable either to the Hamas organization or to some Arab countries. The Israeli conditions are not about the release of hostages, madam. It's about the post-war Gaza. So when I say that the United States is complicit in what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip, that's what I mean, that there is an identity of views between Washington and Israel on how and on what condition, under what conditions this ceasefire could obtain. I didn't mean to say that the United States does not want a ceasefire, but the United States, what I meant is that the United States wants a ceasefire according to Israeli conditions. And we have been, ever since last January, these negotiations and the mediation efforts have failed because the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, are trying or have been trying to bridge the gap between what Israel is calling for and what Hamas could accept.
The US ambassador to the UN was saying that they would not support any measure that fails to condemn Hamas and does not call for Hamas to disarm and leave Gaza, arguably something that Israel is also calling for. Sir, I just wonder, because Egypt and Qatar have been instrumental in trying to move forward on some form of ceasefire, help us to understand where we are with those negotiations.
Well, apparently, madam, that these two countries are still exercising their efforts, but we are waiting for the results. The results would be a complete ceasefire, the release of the hostages. The numbers will be, of course, negotiated between the Israelis and the Hamas, and then the unfettered delivery, unconditional delivery of humanitarian assistance. I can't understand, madam. I can't understand on purely humanitarian grounds. How can any country, and in this case a great power, justifies its refusal, its rejection of a United Nations Security Council resolution calling for unconditional delivery of human assistance, because this draft resolutions has failed to condemn the Hamas attacks of October 7th, 2023. There is a very dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. And yesterday, I was following on the BBC the interview by the chief of the International Red Cross, in which she said, and I'm quoting her, she said that the situation in Gaza is hell on earth.
What?
Can't we stop on purely, madam, humanitarian basis? Can't we stop what's going on in Gaza now? 2 million people are starving to death.
A dire situation, but just in a sentence, because this is always the bugbear, what happens to Hamas?
Madam, there is an Egyptian initiative that was approved by the Arab world, by the Muslim countries, and by the leading European powers. And it has stated, although implicitly, that in the post-war Gaza, Hamas won't have any role.
That is very clear. Hussein Haridi, Egyptian ambassador, former assistant foreign minister for Egypt. Thank you very much for your clarity.
Thanks for having me, madam.